Back in 1984, psychologist Robert Cialdini documented something that should make you uncomfortable. A small, unsolicited favor, something you didn't ask for, something that cost almost nothing, dramatically increases the likelihood that you will comply with a later, larger request from the same person. Not slightly, dramatically. And the person on the receiving end almost never sees it coming. Because it doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like someone being kind. Before we get into why that happens, I want to name something. If you've ever felt that strange, low-level discomfort when someone does something nice for you that you didn't ask for, and then felt guilty for feeling uncomfortable, you're not ungrateful. You're not cynical. You're not broken. That discomfort is information. Your nervous system was flagging something your conscious mind couldn't articulate yet. That's what we're articulating today. The common take is that accepting help graciously is a virtue, that pushing back on a gift or feeling weird about it makes you the problem. And that's true, sometimes. But what Cialdini was documenting wasn't generosity. He was documenting a mechanism. And the mechanism doesn't care whether the giver knows they're using it. The moment you receive something you didn't ask for, your brain opens a ledger. It registers a debt. And it doesn't close that ledger until you've repaid it, or until you understand what's actually happening. The question isn't whether you're being manipulated. The question is where on a specific spectrum any given giver actually sits. Because the same act, making someone coffee, covering a shift, leaving a gift on your desk, sits at a completely different position on that spectrum depending on one thing: what the giver expects in return. Most people never learn to read that. Today, that changes. Here's what most of us were taught. Generosity is straightforwardly good. Someone covers your lunch, that's thoughtful. Your colleague stays late to help you finish a project, that's solidarity. Your neighbor watches your cat while you're away, that's community. And the social contract says, you receive these things graciously, you feel grateful, and you look for ways to return the favor in kind. That's the story of functional human society. And most of the time, that story is accurate. Most people who do things for you are just doing things for you. This matters, because what we're talking about today isn't a reason to distrust everyone who's ever been kind to you. The person who brought you coffee is almost certainly just someone who wanted to bring you coffee. That's real. That happens constantly. The mechanism Cialdini documented is not a description of all giving. It's a description of what happens in your brain regardless of the giver's intent. The receiver's nervous system doesn't get to read intent. It only gets to read the act, which is where it gets interesting. Cornell organizational behavior professor Vanessa Bohns spent years studying how social pressure works. And what she found consistently was that people dramatically underestimate the pressure they exert on others. The person giving the favor assumes the receiver can just decline it, ignore it, or receive it lightly. But Bohns' research shows the receiver experiences something closer to a pressure field, a pull toward reciprocity that most people feel viscerally, but almost never articulate. You didn't ask for the favor, but now you owe it. Your brain registered the debt before you had any say in the matter. If this is the kind of thing you want more of, the specific mechanism behind why your interpersonal instincts are more accurate than you've been giving them credit for, subscribe. Because that's exactly what this channel is built on. So if the debt instinct fires regardless of whether the giver is genuine or strategic, and you can't read intent from the outside, how do you actually tell the difference? You learn to read the position. The giver's awareness is irrelevant to the debt. Only the debt matters. And only the position tells you the truth. What I want to give you is a map, not a list of warning signs. Not, here are the 5 types of manipulators to avoid. A continuous scale, 3 anchor positions. And the understanding that the same behavior, the same coffee, the same covered shift, the same small gift, can sit at any point along it depending on one variable: what the giver does next. I'm calling it the reciprocity spectrum. At the far left, genuine generosity. The giver acts, the gift lands, and then nothing. No follow-up, no mention, no ledger. The act is complete from the moment it's received. If you ask a genuine giver why they did it, They'll give you an answer that has nothing to do with you owing them anything, because that thought never occurred to them. The loop closes when you smile and say thank you, and it stays closed. At the far right, something different is happening. The giver still gives. The gift still looks like a gift. But internally, in their accounting, the ledger is open. They noticed when they gave it. They remember what it cost them. And at some point, they'll remember that you received it. The request that follows isn't always immediate. Sometimes it comes weeks later, in a context that seems completely unrelated. Sometimes it's framed as another favor. I know you're busy, but I did cover your project last month. And then you feel it, that pull, that obligation, the compulsion to say yes to something that, in any other context, you might have declined. A 2024 study published in Psychological Reports found something that explains exactly why this works. In controlled competitive conditions, participants honored social debts even when doing so directly cost them, even when they knew it was costing them. The reciprocity response didn't wait for rational self-interest to weigh in. It executed first. That's the mechanism weaponized obligation exploits. The target's brain executes the reciprocity script before the conscious mind has time to ask whether the original favor was even genuine. There are 3 signals that distinguish a debt deposit from a genuine gift. First, timing. Was it given before a request, not after? Genuine givers don't gift in anticipation of need. Second, proportionality. Is what they eventually want dramatically larger than what they gave? A coffee that buys them a weekend favor isn't exchange, it's investment. Third, tracking. Have they mentioned what they did? Once, specifically in the context of asking for something? A genuine giver doesn't remember the ledger because there was no ledger. A strategist remembers the line item precisely. Think about the last time someone did something for you that you didn't ask for, and it was later invoked. Did you know it was being tracked? Did you? But here's where most people get lost when they learn about reciprocity weaponization. They assume the choice is binary: genuine giver or strategic operator, good person or manipulator. And that binary creates a problem, because if you see everything as potential manipulation, you stop being able to receive anything. You become defended, not discerning. So where does that leave the vast middle of human interaction? Most of social life lives in the middle of this spectrum, what I'm calling social lubrication. Normal, mutual give and take. Both parties understand the implicit cultural contract. You cover lunch today, they get drinks next time. Nobody is tracking it obsessively, but everyone vaguely knows it evens out. This is how functional relationships stay functional. And here's the nuance that matters most. A researcher who studies ethical blind spots at NYU argues that not everyone operating toward the right end of this spectrum is consciously aware of it. Some favor givers track debts without ever examining why. They've absorbed the social bookkeeping habit without ever asking what they were actually doing with it. So here's the question. Think of the last time someone did something for you that you didn't ask for, and you felt that uncomfortable pull to repay them. Not a mutual friend, not a family member in a clear give and take. Someone where the favor came in a particular context, and then something was eventually asked for. Where do you think that person sits on this spectrum? And this is the more important question. What tells you that? Not what you want to believe about them. What tells you? Being somewhere on the right side of this scale doesn't automatically make someone malicious. It might mean they've never examined the mechanism. It might mean they learned this pattern somewhere and never questioned it. The spectrum doesn't require a verdict. It just requires a location. Here's what the reciprocity spectrum is actually about. It's not a manipulation detector. It's not a list of red flags. It's a tool for reading intent from the only data you actually have: behavior. Because intent is invisible. Motive is invisible. But timing is visible. Proportionality is visible. Whether something gets mentioned when something else is wanted, that's visible. The spectrum doesn't ask you to judge people's hearts. It asks you to read their ledger. And once you can read a ledger, you can decide what you put into it. Now, what do you do with this? Not as theory. Tonight. The goal isn't to refuse every favor. It's calibration. A genuine giver wants your gratitude. A weaponized giver wants your obligation. The calibrated response breaks the debt loop. 2 phrases. First, when receiving something you didn't ask for, "That's really kind of you. I want to be clear though. I can't commit to anything in return, but I genuinely appreciate the thought." Your colleague who always covers for you at work and then asks for things you can't easily say no to. Next time they offer, use those words. You've received the act. You've declined the ledger. You're not accusing anyone. You're just declining to open a tab. Second, when giving, no expectation here. This is genuinely just because I wanted to. You bring your neighbor a plant when they get back from a trip. As you hand it over, say it. 1 sentence. That phrase closes your loop before it opens. One thing to watch for. Most people are in the middle of that scale. The calibrated response isn't protection from generosity. It stops that discomfort we named at the start from being turned into leverage. The tool is for calibration, not defense. And that brings us back to where we started, and what that discomfort was actually trying to tell you all along. The reciprocity spectrum, 3 positions. Genuine generosity, the loop closes when the gift lands. Social lubrication, normal give and take, both parties understand the implicit contract. Weaponized obligation, the ledger is open, the debt is tracked, and what's eventually asked will exceed what was given. 3 signals. Timing, proportionality, whether the favor is mentioned when something is wanted. You came in today with a question you probably hadn't fully formed yet. Something like, is it wrong to feel uncomfortable when someone does something nice for me? The answer, now, is no. That discomfort was your brain registering an open ledger. You just didn't have a name for it yet. Now you do. Here's what I want you to take with you. The reciprocity spectrum isn't a reason to stop trusting people. It's a reason to stop punishing yourself for noticing when something feels off. Genuine givers exist. Most of the giving in your life is real. But you're allowed to have a calibration tool. You're allowed to notice when a favor came before a request. You're allowed to close a ledger before it's opened for you. That's not cynicism. That's precision. Drop a comment if you've ever received a favor that turned out to have a price tag you didn't know about. I want to know what the small favor was and what they eventually asked for. The pattern you just learned to read in others, how someone positions a favor as a strategic debt, has a mirror behavior. Why some people overgive. Why they find it almost impossible to receive without immediately trying to repay. That connection between recognizing weaponized obligation in others and understanding people-pleasing in yourself is the whole next piece. And if you don't want to miss it, that's what subscribing is for.